Thank you for joining me today. I'm here with Dr. Julie Wilson, who's of the Sociology Department here at Emory Henry College. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, thank you for asking me.
I'm in one of your classes this semester.
Yes,
That's a very exciting class. It's called Health Disparities in the United States, and it's through the Sociology Department. So tell me a little bit about the class and what are you overall trying to teach?
Well, I thought it was important given the timeliness of the topic because we're trying to address healthcare in the United States. I thought it was important for Emory and Henry students, particularly those in sociology as well as those in public policy and in political science, to get some grasp of the issue because really it's a very important challenge that's going to face our country, I think, now but also into the future. So it's one of the reasons that I'm teaching the course. And the other reason is just that I'm interested. I worked as a public policy analyst years ago for Blue Cross and Blue Shield Association when Bill Clinton tried to do healthcare reform. And so I really wanted to be informed about what was going on now. So in some ways, quite honestly, the course is as much for me as it is for you guys. But I also have a really good group of students, including you, but the other folks in the class. And so it's a good time to do it because people are intellectually curious about it.
What are some of the things that you're examining in the class? Well,
of course, the first thing we did, precisely because the House and the Senate passed legislation before the December recess, is we really looked at some of the details of the House and the Senate bill so that we could begin to understand what the provisions were, how they were similar, how they were different. That really started us out more on the healthcare policy side. But what I'm really interested in doing, because I'm a sociologist, is looking at health disparities, why some people have better health than others, and what's the social context of those problems. So not looking at it as an individual behavioral issue, but rather the kinds of things that really impact somebody and their overall health. And I think that's very important for all of us to understand, and really, quite honestly, for folks who are engaged in healthcare reform at a level far beyond what we are.
All right, why do you think that healthcare reform is such a hot button issue right now? It's in all of the newspapers, and it's taking over the government right now. Everyone's talking about healthcare reform.
Right.
So tell me a little bit, why do you think that's so important to us right now?
Well, I mean, I think one of the things that's clear from the early 1990s to now, which is when Clinton worked on healthcare reform, is that really wages have risen slightly, but they've not kept up with the pace of costs and healthcare costs or health insurance premium costs. So, for example, we looked at a graph the other day in class from the Kaiser Family Foundation, and that graph showed that since 1999, wages have risen 34%, but healthcare premiums have risen 119%. It's beginning to really hit not just the working poor, who are the majority of the uninsured in our country, but it's really beginning to hit the middle and even the upper middle classes. And so I think people who are more likely to vote are also more likely to now be engaged in healthcare. They're really seeing it affect their own bottom line. They know people who can't get affordable health insurance coverage. So I think that's why it's a hot button issue. That said, President Obama in the State of the Union speech has now said, well, we're going to put jobs first, and I guess that does have to be first, but healthcare and jobs are so closely related that, I hope it doesn't go off the table entirely and we are able to do something about it.
Absolutely. Now you started talking about this. Who are the uninsured?
Well, I mean, the typical uninsured, a lot of people have this image of the uninsured as people who don't work and who don't do very much, and so therefore they can't get insurance. But the typical uninsured folks, there are about 46 million in America, and they tend to be people who come from households where one or more of the adults in the household is working full time. So we know that, I guess, almost 80% of the uninsured happen to be people who have a full-time worker in the family. So we would generally characterize most of the uninsured as the working poor, although there certainly are people with higher incomes who don't have insurance as well. And some of those are going to be young people like yourself who figure that they can afford to go without the coverage because they're generally healthy. But others are just people who either are self-employed and can't afford the individual premiums, or who can get a premium through a small employer. And so, but generally, I mean, these are working people working really hard trying to make ends meet for their families, and they just can't do it. They can't afford any health care coverage, even if their employer offers it.
So in your opinion, what needs to change with the healthcare system? Just maybe a few big things.
Oh, golly. Well, it's really, quite honestly, I don't know that I can give you an unequivocal answer to that question. it is such a complex problem. And I honestly think that one of the things that people have to begin to recognize is the degree to which it is just so incredibly complex. You know, obviously the proposals now in the House and the Senate are really trying to address the uninsured population, and so they're both proposing various forms of health insurance exchanges, ways to pool coverage so that individuals and small businesses can get coverage, some other things to sort of attack some of the more you know, outrageous rating practices of insurance companies. So I think those are really good steps. But you know, one of the issues that we face is we've got a lot of players in the market. Healthcare is, if not the largest, one of the largest contributors to our gross domestic product. So anything we do has repercussions that can't be felt. And so I really don't know what I think the answer is. What I do know is that we really, it's important that everybody have healthcare coverage, because if they don't, then they're not healthy enough to take advantage of the opportunities that are provided in the American system, just like education, right?
All right, so in your opinion, I guess the better question is healthcare change necessary? Is reform necessary?
Absolutely necessary. It is absolutely necessary, because if we have people, I mean, again, going back to the statistics, if we have people working full-time who cannot provide for their families, cannot provide healthcare coverage, nobody's winning. I mean, we might think that it's just that family's problem, but it's my problem if my daughter is sitting next to their sick child. It's my problem if they're coming to work and you know, making me get ill, not to sound perfectly self-interested. And it's also, you know, from my own perspective, and this is just me, Julie Wilson, not me, sociologist, but I think it's a moral, you know, it's a moral obligation that we have, just like with education. Let's give everybody that same, you know, that same undergirding, and then we can move on. So it is really necessary, but how we're going to do it in America is, you know, very much an open door because of all the interests.
Now, why do you think so many people are opposed to healthcare reform? Is it a specific piece of healthcare reform that they're not agreeing with, or do you think it's just the entire bill, or is it just not enough knowledge about what's going on?
Well, I don't know that people are necessarily opposed to healthcare reform. They're supportive of healthcare reform under certain conditions. And again, going back to the Kaiser Family Foundation, they just have such great data. I mean, their healthcare tracking poll shows that, for example, people are very interested in healthcare reform, but they're really worried about it not changing their own package of benefits. So if they have benefits, they really don't want that to get worse. They don't want it to be more costly. I think two things are critical according to that data. One is the overall cost of healthcare reform, which I think at the time was like $817 billion. I mean, it's a huge cost because of the amount of health care. The other piece of it is an individual mandate to have coverage, and people are really opposed to that, but that's an essential element of both the House and the Senate bills. So I think that and the fact that, as I've read recently, we have a lot of members of the Republican Party who are opposed to that individual mandate. You know, how that makes health care look, I don't know. So. All
right, now we're almost done, but in your opinion, is the bill going to ever pass, and why or why not?
Well, you've heard me say in class that I'm very, very pessimistic. I think the bills are generally, you know, they're good bills, the House and Senate version, but they have to come together to agree. That's going to be difficult to do because of the distribution of Democrats and Republicans in the Senate, but also because of the huge variety of interests behind those bills. And you know, quite frankly, I'm not that optimistic about this particular version of healthcare reform passing, simply because there are too many people objecting to certain key parts of it. So I don't think it's going to pass, but you know, this is one of those times when I really, really hope I'm wrong.
Yes, well, I do too. we'll just say we agree on that. But I want to thank you so much for coming on and talking. And as someone in her class, I would like to encourage everyone to check out the literature from the Kaiser Family Foundation. They've done some great work on both the bills and the problems within healthcare. So thank you again.
Thanks, Joanna.
And now let's go with Zach Hupp to the Out and About.